There's a wall sitting in a building in southern France that has not required a single watt of electricity to heat or cool its interior in over 50 years. No furnace, no air conditioning unit, no thermostat, no ducts, no utility bills, no gas line running into the building. The wall itself does all of it. On cold winter mornings, the interior stays warm until well past midnight from heat absorbed through the wall during the day. On blazing summer afternoons, that same wall absorbs excess heat like a sponge and keeps the rooms inside cool and still. One wall, 2 seasons, 0 energy cost, 0 moving parts, 0 subscriptions. And that wall is not some advanced piece of technology. It is not a smart system that took a team of engineers a decade to develop. It is concrete, dark painted concrete covered by glass with a gap of air between them. That is it. The entire system is concrete, glass, and physics. The same materials your great-grandfather's generation worked with, applied in a way that a 10-year-old can understand after 5 minutes of explanation. This system has a name. It was patented for the first time in 1881 by an American scientist, rediscovered and built on a large scale in France in 1967, validated by researchers at Los Alamos National Laboratory in New Mexico during the 1970s, and then quietly pushed to the margins of architecture and building science when cheap fossil fuels returned and a $310 billion industry decided it liked your utility bill exactly where it was. The system is called a Trombe wall, and it is one of the most quietly erased pieces of building knowledge in modern history. Before we get to who buried it and why, we need to understand what it actually is, because the physics behind it are not just interesting. They're almost impossible to believe when you see the numbers. Go back 1,000 years. The Ancestral Pueblo people of the American Southwest, known historically as the Anasazi, were building entire cities out of thick adobe and sandstone in the Four Corners region, the desert where Colorado, Utah, Arizona, and New Mexico meet. They built at Chaco Canyon. They built at Mesa Verde. They built at locations across that brutal landscape where summer temperatures can hit 100 degrees and winter nights can drop below freezing the same week. And they built without a single mechanical system to regulate their indoor temperature. What they understood, through generations of observation and refinement, was that the material of the wall itself was the climate control system. Thick adobe brick walls absorb daytime heat slowly, all day long, and then radiate that stored warmth inward during the cold desert night. In summer, they oriented their structures under south-facing cliff overhangs that shaded the buildings entirely from the high summer sun, while the dense walls acted as a heat sink pulling warmth out of the interior air and storing it in the stone. These were not accidents of design. The layout was intentional, precise, and replicable across hundreds of structures across thousands of square miles. 2,500 years ago, the Greek philosopher Socrates described the ideal house as one with a southern aspect, where the winter sun steals in under the veranda to warm the rooms while the summer sun, traveling higher overhead, is blocked by the overhanging roof. This was not poetry. It was engineering described in plain language. Roman bathhouses used massive south-facing windows to flood interior stone floors with winter sunlight, and the floors stored that energy and released it through the evening. Every major civilization on Earth that lived through genuine climate extremes arrived at the same fundamental insight. The wall is not just a barrier. The wall is a battery. Then, in 1881, a Massachusetts scientist named Edward Morse sat down and formally codified that insight into a patent application titled, with perfect plainness, Warming and Ventilating Apartments by the Sun's Rays. Morse's design was remarkably complete for its era. A dark-colored wall of high-density material facing south. A pane of glass held a few inches from the wall's exterior surface, creating a sealed air gap. Solar radiation passes through the glass, strikes the dark wall, and is absorbed. The glass traps that absorbed energy as heat, the same way a car interior overheats on a sunny day. Thermal energy builds in the air gap and in the wall material itself. Vents at the top and bottom of the wall allow warm air from the gap to circulate into the living space. At night, with the vents closed, the heat, stored deep in the wall's mass, slowly conducts inward, warming the room for hours after the sun has gone down. Morse had the patent. He had the physics exactly right. And then the patent sat untouched, unbuilt, and largely unread for over 80 years. The reason was simple and completely human. Fossil fuels were cheap, coal was abundant, gas was expanding. The effort required to build a thick masonry thermal wall was harder to justify when a furnace could simply burn fuel on demand. The knowledge did not disappear. It went dormant, the way seeds in desert soil go dormant, waiting for a condition that would make germination worth the effort. That condition arrived in the mid-1960s in the French Pyrenees at a small mountain town called Odeillo, where the largest solar furnace in the world sits on a hillside and focuses reflected sunlight onto a single point hot enough to melt steel. The man who built that furnace was a French engineer and physicist named Félix Trombe. He understood solar energy at a deeper level than perhaps any other scientist alive at the time. And in 1967, working with architect Jacques Michel, he applied that understanding not to a laboratory furnace, but to a house. The Trombe house in Odeyo combined everything Morse had patented 86 years earlier with refined materials and modern construction techniques. A massive south-facing wall of poured concrete, roughly 2 feet thick, painted black on its exterior surface. A double layer of glass installed across the entire face of the wall, separated from the concrete by an air gap several inches wide. Vents at the top and bottom of the concrete wall, operable by the residents to control airflow. A roof overhang carefully calculated to block the high summer sun from striking the wall at all, while allowing the low winter sun to reach it fully. The results from that house, measured and published and independently verified, were staggering. 70% of the building's total yearly heating requirement was supplied by the wall alone, with no fuel burned, no electricity consumed, and no mechanical system running. The interior stayed warm well into winter nights, from heat that had been slowly conducted through 2 feet of concrete during the day. According to the physics of thermal mass, heat travels through a concrete wall at roughly 1 inch per hour. That means heat absorbed on the outer face of an 8-inch wall at noon reaches the interior surface around 8 in the evening, exactly when the outdoor temperature is dropped and the rooms need warming most. The system is not just effective, it is elegantly timed. And then came what should have been the Trombe wall's moment of mass adoption. In 1973, the OPEC oil embargo hit the United States with the force of a physical blow. Gas prices quadrupled in months, lines formed at filling stations stretching around city blocks. Home heating bills doubled. The country suddenly wanted what Felix Trombe had been sitting on in southern France since 1967. Researchers at Los Alamos National Laboratory in New Mexico launched a full passive solar research program specifically to develop and validate Trombe wall technology for American residential use. Architects across the country began designing homes around south-facing thermal walls. The New Mexico Solar Energy Association grew to become the largest solar organization in the United States. Books on passive solar design sold out their print runs. A family in Montmedy, France, living in a house with a Trombe wall heating system, documented their results for a full year. Their annual heating bill was roughly $225 compared to an estimated $750 for a comparable, fully electrically heated home in the same area. A 77% reduction in heating load, a 70% reduction in heating cost, from concrete and glass. In 1979, President Jimmy Carter installed solar panels on the White House roof and pledged that by the year 2000, 20% of all American energy would come from the sun. The passive solar movement was not fringe. It was federal policy. It had laboratory validation, published performance data, field case studies, and architectural organizations dedicated to teaching it. And then oil prices collapsed. By the early 1980s, cheap fuel had returned. The urgency evaporated. And a new administration in Washington made a choice, visible in retrospect with devastating clarity, to dismantle the infrastructure that had been built around solar and passive thermal design. Tax credits for solar installations were allowed to expire in 1985. Research and development budgets at the Department of Energy were slashed. The solar panels that had been mounted on the White House roof were quietly taken down during a 1986 roof repair and put in a warehouse in Virginia, where they gathered dust for years before ending up at a small college in Maine. Tens of thousands of people in the nascent solar and passive design industry lost their jobs inside a few years. According to researchers who documented this era, a full generation of professional knowledge and momentum effectively disappeared. And into the vacuum that this retreat created, the HVAC industry expanded without competition. Today, the global HVAC market is valued at over $310 billion annually. In the United States alone, HVAC companies generate $150 billion each year and employ over 1.5 million people. The average full HVAC system installation costs homeowners between $8,000 and $15,000 upfront. The average repair call runs about $350. Annual maintenance agreements, replacement parts, filter subscriptions, new refrigerant regulations, requiring system upgrades, the revenue streams attached to mechanical climate control are layered and continuous and deeply embedded in American homeownership. Now consider what a Trombe wall does to that revenue structure. A Trombe wall built on the south face of an existing home using standard concrete or masonry, dark exterior paint rated for thermal absorption, and double pane glass costs a fraction of a mechanical HVAC installation. It requires no fuel, it requires no electricity, it has no moving parts that wear out, no refrigerants, no filters. The National Renewable Energy Laboratory tested Trombe walls, installed at the Zion National Park Visitor Center in southern Utah, and found that the walls supplied 20% of the building's total annual heating load consistently year after year with zero operating cost. The same report noted that on good solar days during the heating season, the Trombe wall provided all of the heating the building needed through the afternoon and evening hours. A Dutch university research project called Doubleface 2.0, using a modern Trombe wall incorporating aerogel insulation and phase change materials, documented approximately 36% energy savings on heating across multiple building types in a northern European climate, with similar savings on cooling when the wall was operated for summer ventilation. 36% on heating alone. In the Netherlands, where sunshine is not exactly abundant, in sunnier climates with larger daily temperature swings, the American Southwest, the Mediterranean, Central Asia, large parts of South America, the numbers are even more dramatic. A simulation study of a classical Trombe wall in a cold, semi-arid climate found heating energy demand reductions, approaching 86% compared to an equivalent room with no thermal wall at all. 86%. You cannot build a $310 billion annual industry on an 86% reduction in demand. You cannot create a service business around something that has no moving parts, no consumables, and no recurring failure modes. A Trombe wall built in 1967 in Odedo, France, is still standing and still functioning. You cannot schedule a maintenance visit for a wall. So instead, the Trombe wall became what academic historians of architecture now describe as underestimated and insufficiently known. It got reduced to a footnote in passive solar textbooks. Building codes written over decades of fossil fuel abundance did not account for it, did not teach it. And in many cases, created regulatory environments where adding glass to the exterior of a wall requires permitting processes that most homeowners would never navigate voluntarily. The knowledge did not go underground because it failed. It went underground because its success threatened a model that depended on your ignorance of it. Here is what the science says you can actually do with this. If you own a home with a south-facing exterior wall that receives direct winter sunlight, that wall is already a passive solar asset you are not using. The simplest version of what Morse patented in 1881 requires three things: thermal mass in the wall itself, meaning dense concrete, brick, adobe, or stone, rather than lightweight wood framing; a dark exterior surface to maximize solar absorption; and a glazing layer, glass or polycarbonate, held several inches from the wall is faced to trap the greenhouse effect between the two surfaces. Retrofitting an existing south-facing masonry wall with an exterior glazing system is a weekend project that has been documented by independent builders in the American Southwest for under $1,000 in materials, delivering measurable reductions in winter heating bills that begin in the first full billing cycle after installation. For summer cooling, an overhang above the glazing calculated to block the high summer sun, or removable exterior shading panels that can be installed in spring and removed in fall, flips the same wall from a heat source into a heat sink, absorbing warmth from interior air and storing it in the mass rather than releasing it inside. For anyone building new construction, the integration of a south-facing Trombe wall into the design is one of the highest value energy efficiency upgrades available per unit cost of anything on the market. The research from Los Alamos, from French case studies from the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, from Purdue, from universities across Europe, all says the same thing. When done correctly, in the right climate, a Trombe wall eliminates a substantial fraction of both heating and cooling load for the lifetime of the building. That lifetime is measured in decades, in some cases, centuries. Taos Pueblo in New Mexico has been continuously inhabited for approximately 1,000 years. Its thick adobe walls have regulated interior temperature through 1,000 winters and 1,000 summers without a single thermostat, a single compressor, a single wiring diagram. The people who built it understood something that the HVAC industry has spent the last 50 years hoping you would forget. The wall is not a surface, it is a system. Glass and dark-painted thermal mass and a small air gap and the physics of the sun, that is the entire thing. No filter to replace, no technician to call, no utility bill attached to it. Just physics, working exactly the way it has worked since the first rays of sunlight ever struck a stone wall in a cold desert morning, 1,000 years before anyone thought to patent it. If this opens something for you, share it with someone paying a heating bill they don't have to pay. And subscribe, because what we open next goes even deeper.